Hey guys, Mr. Palmer here, back with our second tutorial in Blender. Today we're going to have a look at doing a bit more modifying to models and expanding on some of your skills, as well as playing with some more render settings. So to begin with, like last week, we'll open Blender, File, New, and a General file. Now what we're going to start with today is deleting the cube, because we don't really need it there. And we're going to add in a plane. So to add a plane, we can either go up to add like last time, or the shortcut key is Shift A if you'd like, and that brings up the same menu and plane. Now something I didn't comment on last week is when you add an object or perform any modifier, a little panel pops up here. So with the add plane, and I can actually change some things here. So size, I can make it bigger here just by adjusting. Now mine's currently using meters, so I'm just going to make it 10 meters. Now to begin with today, what we're going to start is build a little workspace. So you can see I've got my camera here, I've got a plane here. I'm now going to duplicate that plane. So I can do that by going Shift D, and that automatically, when I move my mouse, creates a second plane. So this time I want to make like a wall. So what I can do is I want to rotate that object. Now if I just click on the rotate over here, it brings up lots of options. But if I click on type R instead, and then I'm going to click on, I can use X, Y, or Z. So if I click Z, what that allows me to do is just rotate on the Z plane. We go X, just on the X plane, Y, just on the Y plane. Now if I go rotate and Y, so R and Y, that'll start to flip it up. Now I want it to come up exactly to 90, so I'm then going to type 90 and press enter. And that locks that to that vertical plane, so you can see it's perfectly on 90. I go back to my move tool. Now I want to move it and align it to my edge here. Now without using anything else, it can be quite difficult to get those perfectly aligned. Like you can see I thought that was aligned, but when I rotate my view, it definitely wasn't. So the easiest way to do it is to use this tool in the center here, and it's called snapping. We're going to turn snapping on. What snapping allows you to do is it has a couple of different modes. If I click on the little drop down next to it, I'm going to go snap to a edge. So what it's now going to do is snap to the closest edge, and you can set closest, move, and I can go center or an active edge. So if I go closest, as I move it, it'll want to select, it'll want to move that and snap to an edge, and you'll see once it drags on there, a little orange circle appears and I can drag it along. That one's good. Now I'm going to duplicate it again. Just move my mouse to paste it there, and this time I want to rotate on the Y axis. Rotate on the Z axis. I'm going to type 90 and press enter. I'm going to drag that up here too. So snap to an edge. Just like that. You can see that snapped in place. Now, you can also have options here. So you can see with the move tool up, there's lots there. It tells you its exact location. If I press N on my keyboard, it also brings up a transform window. Now what the transform window does is it shows me values. So you can see rotation, location, scale, and dimensions. I can change values here. So say I was to change rotation, and you'll see it'll change it just like I was before. To close that menu, I'm going to press N. Now today we're going to have a go at making like a cup and a saucer. So I'm going to start by picking the mesh shape that I think is closest to my cup. So that's going to be a cylinder. Now whenever I go add mesh, it always spawns to where this axis point is. Now that axis point I can move by going Shift S, and it brings up this. So move the active cursor to the world origin. So that's this point here. And I just let go of my mouse and it does that. If I go to the selected cursor, it moves to where my object is. I'm going to go to world origin because that's right in the center here. That's where it's going to spawn my object. I'm going to Shift A again, but this time I'm going to add a cylinder. Now what I want to do is I want to move this cylinder up. So I'm going to click on it, and again, this time I'm going to use snapping to a face and just drag it down until it snaps on that face, and you'll see it's perfectly aligned with that bottom plane. Now what we're going to do with this cylinder is we're going to start to shape it. And this is where I can use different views. So I'm going to go up to the view and go viewpoint and front. Now if you have a numpad on your keyboard, you might be able to change the view, but this gives me a perfectly 2D view. What I'm going to start by doing now is start to modify my cup. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and you'll see I've got the outlines here. What I'm going to use is I'm going to put in something called a loop cut. Now there's different ways to do this. Loop cut is a function that you'll find over here. But if I just go, I'm going to use the shortcut, go Control R. Now you can do loop cuts on a vertical or on horizontal. So the first click is the plane that's going to do the cut in. So I click, and then if I just move it up and down, I can add several cuts. So I'm going to start with adding in a couple of different points. So I'm going to add in another one. So click again and drag it up. Click and drag. Now these are going to be shape points that I use to shape my cup. And we'll just leave the last one towards the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to select just an edge. So to do that, I change to edge select. If I hold Alt, it'll select a whole edge for me. So I'll go back to my side on view, and this is where I'm going to start to shape my edge. So if I now use the scale tool, I'm going to scale that one out a bit. Alt and left click on the second row, scale that one out a bit. So it can only scale in those two planes. Now from this point is where I'm going to start to make my curve. So Alt, click, scale, just bring it in slightly. Alt, click, scale. Now I might go back and change it a bit afterwards. But down the bottom here, I'm actually going to do quite a bit. So I'm going to Alt, click and scale, and drag this one right in. Alt, click, scale. Alt, click, scale. Now shortcut for scale is S. See, I'm starting to get a cup shape. Now I might play with it a bit more. I might want it a bit fatter up top here. So I'm just going to drag it outwards so it looks a bit rounder. Alt click scale. And it's starting to look more like a cup. Now for my cup, once I'm happy with my shape, which I'm pretty happy with there, I'm actually going to hide this plane down the bottom here. So I've got 3 planes. I'm going to rename this one because I know it's the bottom. So I'm going to go floor. I'm going to hide that one. Then plane 2, I'm going to go wall 1 and hide that as well. And then last one, wall 2, and hide that because I don't need to see them. On the bottom of my object, what I'm going to do is I want to select with a face this time. So click on that face, and I just want to make a flat bottom. So I'm going to press extrude, which is E, and just drag downwards a tiny bit. Now I'm going to turn off snapping so that it doesn't try and snap to the grid. and it'll let me extrude in small increments. Just so I have a bit of a flat bottom. And then I'm going to press on I, which will allow me to make it, oh, I'm not going to press on I, I'm just going to make that smaller. Alright, once I've got that, I need to make the inside of my cup. Now to do this, it starts with deleting this object here. So to delete that face, if I press on X on my keyboard, which brings up the delete menu, I'm going to go face. So this is the shape of my cup. Now there's a couple of different ways you could do this. I'm happy for you to try either way. So first one is if I select my whole object, I'm going to go add a modifier and solidify. Now we need to go back into object mode. You'll see what that's done is it started to thicken out my cup. Now I can make that thicker by coming over to the right here. So the modifier is the tool and changing my thickness. Now what that's done is it's added an internal layer to my cup. And the way we can check that is by going into a wireframe. So to go into a wireframe, I can either do that by clicking up the top here and go wireframe, and you'll see there's now a second internal layer inside the cup. The other thing you can do, if you hold Z on the keyboard, you can change between how you're viewing your cup. So I'm going to go back to solid. Now, once I'm happy with my cup shape, you might be like, oh, it's a bit rough. So what I can also do is with my object selected, right click on it and go shade smooth. And I'll start to see what my cup looks like. Now I'm not entirely happy with this top here because it looks a bit rough, a bit flat. So what I can do is if I go back into edit mode and if I add in some more loop cuts, so Control R, just make sure nothing's selected. You'll see if I zoom in, how far away I get from the edge determines how the loop cut plays around. So if I add that in, you'll see it starts to affect my shape in different ways. Now if I make it really close to the top, it'll start to smooth it. So I'm going to press apply on my modifier here so that I don't need to modify it, like play with any more of the solidifier. Need to be in object mode, press apply. I'm going to go back into my edit mode now, and the other modifier I'm going to add is a subdivision surface. So what that does is it divides all these little squares up into more. Now you have a couple of different options here. We need to change, in the render at the moment it's set to 2, I'm going to change the viewport to 2 because that's what we're working in. And you'll see it's now added even more subdivisions. If I was to add another loop cut, you'll probably see more happen to that edge. So Control R, and it starts to smooth or raise the edge. So I'm going to just add it a bit closer, and you'll see I've got a nice smooth looking edge. So once I've got my cup, what's next? I want to add a handle. So I'm going to pick two faces here with my face select and start to extrude them. Now if I go back to my viewport, because I want to extrude in one plane only, better make sure I have the right side selected. So this is the two on the side. View, front. So if I press extrude now, so the E key, and drag them out, you'll see it can start to drag out a shape. So I'm going to drag it out a little bit. And if I hit R, I can actually rotate how the surface of that model plays. Now because I'm looking at it from a side on, it's only rotating in one plane. So I'm going to tilt that up a bit, extrude a bit more, Now this time when I click to finish the extrude, I'm actually going to press the S key for scale and shrink it down a bit so it's not as big. I'm going to extrude a bit more. Maybe even rotate up a bit. Now what I can do is I'm actually going to use another tool that's over here on the side. It's a modifier in the edit mode. It's called spin. So I'm going to shift and right click to bring my axis tool. So shift and right click to bring that cursor kind of in the middle where my circle will be. I now go spin. I'm just going to drag out to the left. You'll see it drags that shape around for me. I could go and extrude it continuously and try and rotate it, but I don't think I can do it as well as this mode. I'm going to drag that round to about there. Now what you'll notice is if I have this spin, I can add how many steps. So I can add more or less. So I'm going to take mine up a bit just to smooth it out. I can also play with which angles it's rotating about. So you see at the moment it's rotated perfectly in one plane, but say you had it so it rotated in an X and Y plane, you can adjust the rotation here. So it's only rotating about Y at the moment. Now once that's done, close spin, I'm just going to go back up to here, and I'm going to do something to finish off my cup. I'm going to extrude it a bit more, and then I'm going to rotate my face down a bit. Now, what we're now going to do is we're going to delete these faces here and delete two faces on this side of the cup here to make them match up. So if I press X, brings up my delete menu, and I'm going to hit face. So it's now deleted those two faces there, and there's now a hole. I'm now going to select two faces on my cup that I want it to connect to, press X and delete faces. Now you'll notice you'll be able to see the inside of the cup. This is where we're going to go to edge select. I'm going to select these edges. You've got to be careful here. Make sure I hold shift. I just want to select the edge of that external shape. I can rotate around using my mouse. If you select anything extra, make sure you deselect it just by clicking on it with shift and click. I'm going to select the edge of these two here as well. So I have two squares. Together like this. Now I could extrude it and join them together, but there is a function that will join them together for you. So if I go function on my keyboard and hit F3, if you're on a keyboard without a function key, you might just be able to press F3. And I'm going to type in the word bridge. What that'll do is it's now done the connection for me. Now once that's done, I can open this up and have a look at my options here. So I can either reduce the amount of merge or I can add more to it. So it was on 0.5 to begin with. You can play with twists and the number of cuts it adds. So the more cuts I add, the less impact it has. So I'm going to add 2 cuts. So it's a slightly smaller handle. And I can actually bump the smoothness up. So I might bump it up to 5. Oh, actually, I don't know if it needs to be that high. 1.5. And that looks okay to me. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge again around this object. So I'll go to my select tool and select the edge. And I'm just selecting where those edges are. Now, if you can't see them, you can go into wireframe mode and select that way. It can be a bit tricky once you've got a lot of modifiers on there. So I've got that edge selected. And I'm just going to go back into this mode. If I hold Shift and E, it now allows me to add or tidy that up a bit. So as I drag out, it creates more of a tight and defined edge. It's almost like doing another loop cut. It's making a crease. So you can see I've added a crease that's brought that back in. And I could do the same thing with the top one. So again, if I select my edge around this top one, make sure you don't get that random one. You could tidy up that crease as well. If I go back into object mode, have a look at my cup, it's looking a lot better. It's got a nice handle, it's ready to go. Now, next step. Once I've got my cup done, I'm going to finish with that apply there so that it closes. So once you apply the modifier, you can't change these values anymore. So I'm going to press apply and just leave that. I'm pretty happy with the shape of my cup. I'm now going to add in another object. Now I want to add this object. This is going to be my plate. I want it to add to the bottom of the cup. So first thing I'm going to do is move this cursor. So I'm going to go Shift and go cursor to selected object. And it moves it into the middle. I'm going to go Shift A and add in a circle this time. And with my circle, I'm going to scale it out a bit. And I want to make sure that I fill that face, which I can do in edit mode. Okay, so I'm going to bring that down. Edit mode. And I want to, by pressing E, extrude, you'll see it just does the edges here. I'm going to fill that face in, which we'll do in a second. Yep. So we've got this, it's coming down. Now again with this circle, sorry, I'm going to just go back a step. When I add it in, fill type, I'm going to go end gone. That adds my face. Sorry, it's easier to do there. I'm going to scale it out so it's slightly bigger. And when I move it, I'm going to turn on snapping. I'm going to snap it to an edge and drag this down so that it snaps to the bottom edge of that cup. Now with this face, what I want to do is I'm going to add some rings to it as well. So pressing Ctrl R, in edit mode, I'm going to add some loop cuts. So have my object selected, Ctrl R, I'm going to scale it in, and then what I'm going to do is extrude and bring it down. Now if you just want it to go in one direction, all you need to do is type it. So we're going to make it seating like on a coaster, slight change of design. So I'm going to go extrude, and I just want, if I wanted the Y direction, it goes the Y. So if I go E and X, so it goes the X direction, so E and Z. Just going to bring it down a bit. Now what I'm going to do this coaster is with it selected, I'm going to go back to object mode. And again, I'm going to add a modifier. So add modifier, subdivision surface, and you'll see it should start to apply it. Then if I add some loop cuts in edit mode, you see I've got a lot more faces here. If I was to add a loop cut, to this side, so to the circle area. I'll start to smooth my edge. I go back into object mode, and I'm going to change that to shade smooth, so right click shade smooth, and I'm going to turn my walls back on, my floor. You'll see I have a problem. My object is below the earth. So what I need to do, turn my walls back off, a circle here, go into edit mode. It also looks like there's a face that isn't filled on the bottom here, so alt click, right click, and fill, and you'll see it's filled it for me. Now what I'm going to do in object mode, so I'm going to connect these two objects together so they move as one. It's called parenting. So if I click this first one, hold shift and click the second one, I go control P, so make sure you press control and go object. Those two objects can now, if I move one, it should move the other. So hold shift, control P, and keep transform. So I move one and now it moves the other as well. I'll turn my wall back on, turn this one on, turn this one on, select my base here, and I'm going to make sure with snapping still on, it snaps to the floor. Alright, last thing to do is to look through our camera. And I'm going to adjust my camera position. So if I go up to this top right hand corner, and when I see the plus, drag to the left, I can make a second workspace. So I'm going to leave one of these workspaces. I'm going to go view, camera, active camera. In the other one, I'm going to move this camera around. And that way I can adjust it to get the view that I want. I'm now going to rotate about till I get the view I want. Now once I get to this point, we're going to start adding some materials. So I'm going to add some materials to my walls. So I click on the floor here, and in object mode, material, new, and for the floor, I'm just going to pick a color. I'm going to go a light shade of orange. Now within this viewport over here, I want to see my color. I need to make sure that I'm either in material mode or render, and that starts to show my color. For my walls, I want them to be the same color. So I'm going to make a new material. Now by default, it goes to white, or not pure white. I want these to be a bit of a grey, so I'm just going to make them a bit darker. Now if I want my two walls to be the same color, this wall has grey, but this one currently has nothing. To apply the same material, if I click on this drop down material and click on material 2, which I know was the grey one I just made, it applies that to the wall. Now the last thing, my coaster. So this coaster here, I'm going to go for a brown color. So I might need to make my colors a bit darker to get the brown I'm after. And then for my cup, I can experiment here. So with this, we could try making a see-through cup. So I'm going to turn the V up to 1000. And to make a see-through cup, I should be able to do that by going down to transmission, turning that up to 1000, or turning it up to 1. I'm just going to type 1. And for the roughness, I want to turn that down to 0. Now in the materials window, it doesn't look like much because I'm viewing it with a material. If I change this to my render window, we should start to see some different things happening. Now, I'm going to bring my light in a bit closer. So I'm going to move the light in so it's directly over my cup, creating a shadow. The last thing for you to do is to now go click on the camera, go to render image, and you might find it takes a bit longer this time. Now, this render still looks quite blocky, and that's because we're using the wrong render. What we need to change to is a different type of renderer. So in this menu bar over on the right, click on the context, so the camera, render, and we're going to change to cycles. Should notice now that our cup will now look see-through. So the final thing you will do is you'll go render image. Now for that final render, as I said, it might take some more time. You'll export that glass looking cup out, and I'll export my demo one to put on our classroom so you can see a final result. But as I said, I'd like you to make 2 other objects for the kitchen and put them in your scene alongside your cup. So if you've enjoyed today's lesson, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel because there'll be more content on its way soon. Bye.